Right, so making a risotto today, and especially with chestnuts and pumpkin, which I thought of an idea that I got when I was looking through a Jamie Oliver uh, website, which I thought was a good idea. And it's winter time, so it's chestnut time. Let's go. Why not? Thought thing that no one tells you with roasting chestnuts or really roasting anything is it's all about having even coverage. So especially with things that you're not planning on turning very much, things you can't be asked to turn, if they're very small things that aren't easy to turn, put them on racks. And especially if you have a shitty oven like I do, so a non-convection oven, make sure you put whatever you're roasting uh, with as much room around it for the air to move around it as possible, even though there isn't much moving air in a non-convection oven. So with chestnuts, you're meant to score the bottom with a knife. I've got no idea what I'm doing with chestnuts, so that's why I look like I'm just butchering these things. But it turned out pretty well, actually. They ended up being fairly easy to peel, despite I didn't think I was doing the right thing at the time. I guess it'll have to come back to that. I think perhaps deeper scoring. I'm not too sure though. I think the oven was set basically as hot as it went at first. So like probably realistically the temperature inside the oven was probably not more than like 180 degrees realistically, non-convection, non-fan forced. So nothing would be really going on in there that's too exciting. So just to get the chestnuts in there and up to temperature initially, and hopefully just get some sort of heating action on them. Something that's just so important that people never mention when it comes to cooking channels or cooking videos in general is organization. Now, obviously, you can see from the state of my utensil drawer there, organization is definitely the key. No, but seriously, so it's really important to have your actual work area. It might not be like tidy. There might be stuff all over the place, as you can probably tell, and anyone who knows me that will say that my life is a mess. But the actual space itself, like there's a chopping board with nothing on it, and there's the bin to my right, and then the thing that I'm chopping is sort of moving from right to left, and so the scraps are moving to the right, and the food as it's being processed will be moved to the left. At least that's the idea. The idea is to have some sort of an overarching theory about it. Don't just do things without thinking about them. Have some sort of a plan. At least if it's a bad plan initially, you can refine it over time. But it's good to have some sort of an idea about the small details. Always a good idea to give a knife a quick little sharpen if it in fact needs it. That's probably one of the important parts to recognize. The things that no one again will tell you is that just when it needs it, and not more often than that. I don't know about how to store pots and pans. If anyone knows how to store pots and pans effectively, let me know. The mystery of the pumpkin. How does one actually approach a pumpkin? Certainly, just not with a dirty spoon at least. Get a nice clean spoon. It's always a good idea. Very satisfying thing to do to scrape out the insides of a pumpkin with like a sharp sort of spoon like that. Very, very satisfying. But yeah, I saw Jamie as well. He just sort of took all the fleshy, fibrous bits and the seeds. It's like on a baking tray and like use it like made store-bought pepitas, with the pumpkin seeds in there. I don't know if that works or not. Maybe it's something worth looking at next time. God, I love a chucks. A nice, well-folded chucks. See, something to put a spoon into. Love those things. Those mini gastros, you can buy them from QCC. You can buy them from all sorts of kitchen stores for just almost nothing. Even if they were like $5 a pop, they're still cheaper than like some stupid Tupperware containers. Probably people tell you to keep the skin on the pumpkin. Who cares? Who cares what people say? Do what you want. Pink beanie there from Kiara. I think it's fun to try and scrape these things off. It almost certainly makes no difference whether or not there's some bits of green on the pumpkin. You could probably waste more and get more of the green off. You could probably, it doesn't matter. It's just kind of fun to carve a pumpkin a little bit. Enjoy what you're doing. That's the most important thing, because that way you'll actually do it more often. Especially when it comes to food. God, you don't want to make this a chore. More than that, you don't want to be the person who just buys Uber Eats every day. Get some good tunes on, very important. Thanks, Bella, for showing me that tune. Very, very, very good song, that one. Oh no, I missed a bit of pumpkin skin. It's on the shelf down there. I have to go clean that up in a bit. I definitely haven't seen it since making this video. I love doing this. You click it out. It works with potatoes too. You can you put your knife in at two different angles, and you can click it out. Very, very satisfying. It feels like you're like shucking an oyster to some degree. Pop it in one edge. So it makes a very satisfying clicking noise when you get it out the other side. This is just super precise, super Michelin starred. Knife skills right here. Though it is good to have a knife, I'll at some point would love to go on in great great length about the knife that I use, the Global G2. It's the only knife that I recommend as a chef's knife for a home cook. It's the only knife that you'll need probably for your entire life. I obviously haven't lived an entire life, so it's hard to say that it really is, but certainly it seems to be the perfect middle ground between a European blade and a Japanese steel. Definitely we'll have to remember to talk about that at great length at some point. I think it's good to not have uniformly. Obviously, you want pieces to not be completely dissonant in their sizes, but you want some variation, I think, because that way you get different levels of caramelization. So some are more browned, some are even almost blackened, a bit of bitterness to it, and some are still quite sweet and quite whole and have retained some texture through to the very end. Remember, store your olive oil in a dark bottle, in a dark corner. That's always good. Plenty of salt, not too much olive oil. I use too much olive oil. And then I put these because again, the oven's tiny and we don't have more than one baking rack, which would be ideal to have another baking rack to actually put the second baking tray onto. So I just stuck it at the bottom of the oven, and it gets very little heat down there. So it almost it's like a preheat to the pumpkins before they actually start to roast when the chestnuts come out. This is me trying to separate them all, so there's like just some sort of vague attempt at making each piece of pumpkin have its own particular spot on the tray, which would be nice, but again, it's just not going to happen in the real world. Don't know why I'm checking my watch there. Bit of Jamie on the tunes, that's always good. It's my trivet for pulling things out. So for some reason my girlfriend loves to chop food up on that chopping board. Couldn't tell you why. It doesn't seem like a good idea to me, but nevertheless, carry on undeterred, Kiara. This is me. I think I turned the temperature down a little bit. Don't know why I did that. There's not much rhyme or reason to anything that goes on in the kitchen, frankly. When you cut an onion, cut obviously the growing tip off first. See there how I left a strip of the skin came off with it? So you want to cut through the flesh of the onion, and as you're coming to the skin on the other side, try and stop the blade before it cuts all the way through that dry skin and begin to peel. So if you can take a layer of that off, it'll make your life a lot easier. then yeah, if you can be asked to dirty a second knife, use a small paring knife to peel back that skin there. Just standard chopping up an onion finely. Do it as slow as you want. Use a box grater. Use one of those hand stick blender things with the attachments. This is a very oniony onion, as I recall. It had me bawling. That band-aid on my finger, not actually from a knife injury from the kitchen, which is fairly unusual. No, it's actually from doing illegal electrical work on my house. Look at that organization. Love it. Love the state of that drawer. Love that little salt pig that we have there. Is ceramic with little painted blue with some lemons on it. Very beautiful thing. Came all the way from the Amalfi Coast, in particular from Amalfi, the town. Absolutely one of the most beautiful places on earth, except for the beaches, obviously, and the filthy, like the rubbish. The town's nice. It's funny, you go to the coast in Italy, and it turns out that like the inland part right behind the water was actually the nicest bit. Maybe if you're really rich and have like a boat, it gets nice then. Maybe it's nice, but I think like the transition from land to sea in the Mediterranean is not a nice place to be. There's no sand. The rocks are all they suck because they're covered in cigarette butts and or other rubbish. But the water's quite nice, I guess. Nothing like a beach though. That classic IKEA wardrobe next to the stove there functions as a pretty good fridge. So here the chestnuts look like they are. I thought that they would be ready at this stage, and I had a look at them and they weren't. I think what I was looking for at the time, what I think the go is to see a fair bit of the yellow flesh underneath them. If there's just like there's sort of two layers of skin to a chestnut, there's a really hard exterior outer coat, and then underneath that is a thinner, flakier, much more difficult to peel brown sort of a skin, and you want both of them to lift away from the yellowish flesh underneath. And in particular, to do that, you want to get some moisture involved in the heating process. And so luckily there's obviously a lot of moisture in these plants. And so you pop them in a bowl when when they are done, cover them with some plastic wrap, something to keep the humidity in, then put the bowl in like a vaguely warm area. I think that some of these chestnuts weren't done yet. And yeah, so the steam will soften the skins and help lift them off the actual flesh. Buy yourself a silicone spatula. The next time you get to a Woolies, and I think Aldi might stock them now even on occasion when they do their sales. Certainly Woolies and Coles have them. Buy a silicone spatula. Keep your wooden spatulas, wooden spoons, I should say, and spatulas specifically and only for when you are cooking minced meats and you need to break the mince into smaller and smaller pieces. That is the only time I think, and perhaps scraping particularly uh, like baked on fond off the bottom of a pan. So like those black and brown bits that you get on the bottom of pans after cooking things in like onions and things in pans for a while, and you want to scrape like fond off to emulsify it into sauces and soups. That's definitely the only time that I'll be using a wooden one, because the silicone ones, it just reduces the amount of cleanup you need to do by so much. And there's no wastage either, because you get everything from that's in the pot, you can literally just scrape it off. And of course you can see this really easily from this video here, because I'm not pointing the camera at my chest at all. It's pointed directly at what you want to be seeing here. Superb cinematography. That's like David Fincher right there. The oven opens, the blast of steam, the camera just goes a little bit blurred out. Really, the chestnuts, the steaming them serves a couple of purposes because they'd be far too hot to actually, well, not too hot to handle, but they suck to have to handle them when they're straight out of the oven. So steaming them lets them cool down a bit, and you also want to wait as long as possible, so as much steam as possible can permeate under the skins and help lift off that second underlayer of chestnut flaky skin, which is super annoying. You can sort of see this how the pumpkins are. Some of them are sort of starting to come together. Again, the cinematography is just superb because what you're not looking at is my chest in like a third of the screen here, really able to see quite easily. So you can sort of see this silicon spatula there. It kind of has difficulty scraping off fond from the bottom of pans, but it still works. And if it still works for things like this, it will probably work for most times that you need to scrape fond off a pan. I honestly only use wooden spatulas for when I'm breaking up mince meat that's being sautéed. Yeah, peeling chestnuts, another great bit of cinematography here. We can look at my watch, which is quite nice. The discontinued Seiko SKA 371, 731, 371, something like that. It's an absolute travesty they discontinued that watch. Never been to, I've only been to Rome once. My girlfriend's dad bought me that t-shirt. It's a nice maroon. And I quite like the Romulus and Remus kind of vibe, suckling from a wolf. That's pretty cool. Keeping these chestnut skins, chuck them in the compost. Why not? Should really chuck the pumpkin skins in the compost too, but didn't really think about that. It's pretty clear here. So some of this pumpkin's definitely burned, so I'll definitely be eating that. And some of it's, almost cooked, which I would say you want that. You want those different, because so what? There's like flavors and textures of X. That's pretty much like the staple thing now in wank off restaurants that they like to make now. Flavors and textures of almonds, flavors and textures of pumpkins, whatever you want. And they'll just do the same. They'll get 30 kilos of almonds and they'll take 10 kilos and turn that into like a fucking foam. Take 10 kilos and turn it into like some sort of a powder. So if you could, as a home cook, you could take the one pan and essentially all you're doing is just chopping things up in erratic fashion. Not even erratic, you're just not really paying so much attention as to where as to each individual piece. You're not giving a shit about the uniformity of each piece, and that's actually a good thing because you get these different flavors and textures of the single thing. It was a mistake. It was a mistake to let the TV guide us with regards to how to cook at home. So there's little trays. Again, things aren't tidy, but then they're sort of or neat, but it's at least have a vague order. There's a vague sense of what the hell is going on. It's not just like everything is although everything is in a certain sense away and not in the best place in the world, but people can come in and dance to you while you're trying to see if the stock's still in date, which it was by a couple of days, but if it wasn't, just boil it for maybe a minute, 2 minutes. That's good to go then, pretty much. Smell it, taste it. I had a chef who would always tell me whenever I'd ask, if I was cooking something, right? If I was cooking whatever it might have been, like a sauce, very often it was a sauce, and I'd ask, chef, do you think the sauce is done yet? And he would say, why are you asking me? Ask the food. And that's something that sticks with me all the time. What are you asking someone else for? What are you asking someone's opinion for? Don't even ask your own opinion. Ask the food itself. Taste the food, and it will tell you whether or not it's done. Yeah, look at that. Half store-bought shit stock, half homemade chicken feet, chicken stock, and it'll be a fair amount of water going into this risotto because I definitely think that water has a very good place to be in risotto. This is one of my housemates' honing steel, the F Dick honing steel, quite like that. After sharpening the knife earlier on, it works pretty well having a bit of sharpening and then a bit of honing. It really, really does work. It's not like that wank thing where you're like, oh, like I'm gonna do it once every 6 months. And if you really do it like every time just before you go to use the knife, it will honing that is, it will likely make your life easier. But every time you pick up a knife, you should make it a habit to feel the blade with the palm of your thumb. And if you're a baller, you can run it down your nail and feel any burrs that have accumulated on the blade and get to know what that feels like when something's sharp and when something's dull in that sense. That's something that no one will tell you. People will tell you to sharpen your knife all the time. They'll tell you to hone your blade and etc. But you need to know when that is necessary to do those things. If you're just sharpening and honing just because it's 2 weeks later since no one does. Is the thing. No one in their right mind would ever set like a reminder on their phone to hone their knife. You probably just got to cut into a tomato and realize that you're mashing it instead of cutting it. And you go, oh, maybe I should sharpen my knife, and then you'll put the knife away. Or you might, go 3 or 4 times over your honing steel and forget about it until the next time you have to cut something. Definitely we'll talk about sharpening knives at some point, because I'm a big proponent of using the right tool at the right time. And in this case, because I have a global knife, you can use the global sharpeners, which are really, they make your life a lot easier. I took the time and occasionally will still sharpen a different knife that I have on sharpening stones, and I'll sharpen like my Leatherman pocket knife on a sharpening stone, like a Japanese whetstone. But yeah, the global corporation have made their own equipment to specifically sharpen their knives, so it'd be stupid to not use that tool. Now, cooking garlic. It's really it's a heated topic, that one. How to know when your garlic's done. I was watching an internet Shaquille video, and he was doing a date night video, and yeah, what was it? It was for some sort of a frozen. And I love him. His whole thing vibe is just exactly the ball. It's balling out of control. But he overcooked the shit out of his garlic. And the girlfriend and I were watching it together. And we both at the same time said, "Well, that's wrecked." Reuse that bay leaf. Those bay leaves. Why not? Just standard risotto sort of stuff here. Deglaze with some white wine. A fair bit of white wine, more than you'd think. So I'm trying to use the silicone spatula to scrape off that fond on the bottom of the pot there. And again, it works. It works fine. You don't need a wooden spoon or anything to do that with. But you do need the spatula to actually be able to glide around the edge of the pan to pick up all of those pieces of rice. So nothing, and you can see and you can visually verify that nothing's sticking to any part of the pot. So with risottos, I like to get. Some people put their flavorings in at different stages. My thinking on the topic is you put in. So here's some onions that I caramelized earlier on, or the onion I caramelized earlier on with the bay leaf. That's going in towards the beginning, and so will the pumpkin. The idea was that it would be a pumpkin ravioli with a chestnut garnish, or be a pumpkin and onion ravioli. Because normally, if I was doing this, I would be sauteing the onion and garlic at the same time just prior to putting them in. But I really wanted to saute the garlic and I wanted to caramelize the onion. I just felt like doing something a little bit different, and I had all day to do it in, so I thought it'd be a bit of fun to do it this way. And it was. Even though my girlfriend said I shouldn't have done it this way beforehand. But she didn't know because she wasn't making it, so it sucked in. Then you can also say that I used one onion. I used whatever the size of pumpkin was that they were selling up the road. I used a packet of chestnuts. It was $8, which I thought was completely outrageous. Um, and I measured out 300 grams of rice because I knew that at that point, when I was measuring out the rice, I asked if one of the housemates wanted to eat with us. It was only at that stage that I realized I was cooking for 3 people. The point I'm trying to make is that there's no necessary stage at which you have to know amounts of ingredients. There's no strict amounts of things that you have to put into a pot and say, well, I'm making risotto for 3 people, so I need to have 400 grams of pumpkin, and I need to have 1 onion, and I need to have 600 mils of stock, and 400 mils of water, or some shit like that. Like, it's completely and utterly. Imagine how hard it would be to cook like that. No, that's why no one would probably cook if they cooked like that. It would just be such a chore. So I'm such a tight ass that I'm trying to use some of this stock to get out the pumpkin juices from the bottom of that little pan there. This doesn't end up being the most attractive looking risotto in the entire world. If I could do it again, which I probably will, but differently, and I'll look at this video to think about how I'll do it again. But I would definitely have a different coloured thing along with it. I still don't know how exactly I would go about doing that. That wine, by the way, from Aldi, I think it's $6 a bottle. It's the Riesling that they have at Aldi. Freya and Jules, highly recommend it. Delicious drinking wine, and because it's so cheap, and you'll open the bottle and probably won't drink it all, and you'll let it sit out in living room for like a week, and it'll go off. Just use it for cooking then. Perfect. So slowly, each time you sort of notice that as you drag the spatula along the bottom of the pan, and you can sort of feel and hear that the risotto is sticking to some degree. At that stage, you want to be really careful, and then you want to think about adding some more water. Sometimes a bit more, sometimes not so much more, but just enough to sort of lift the rice off the bottom and turn it into a gelatinous mass again. Here I'm trying to look through my chestnuts and pull out the big pieces because I wanted some to be large. I wanted some whole chestnuts in each serving, and I wanted some of the crumbled up pieces that I couldn't pick out whole to go in, so as to be distributed throughout the risotto. Again, if I could do this again, I think I wouldn't have any whole pieces. I'd cut them at least in half, maybe even into quarters. And I'm not the sort of person to actually cut those. I'd probably just crumble them up into sort of approximately quarters. I think that would be a good idea. But yeah, I think waters definitely has its place in a risotto. Lots of times you'll have a risotto that's ostensibly like a mushroom risotto, but someone will be using a vegetable stock or a chicken stock, and it will end up just being vague vegetable risotto, or it'll be vague chicken risotto, and they end up far too unctuous. And if the chicken stock is homemade, and oftentimes a homemade chicken stock will be made from non-cooked chicken bones, which is like I think they're called like a white chicken stock then. And the unfortunate thing is if you boil a stock for too long, uh, it is possible to do. It's possible to boil vegetables and chickens for too long, so it sort of breaks down the doesn't break them down. Sort of, I guess you drive off even more of the volatile compounds that make up the more grassy and floral notes in the stock, and you get left with what could be used in other situations as a perfectly good stock, but in plenty of other situations it's actually not a very good stock. It turns out being too unctuous. It can be too gelatinous, and it can be too heavy a stock to be used in something that you want to be lighter, like a vegetable risotto, or something that even if you just didn't want to get in the way of the flavors that you're putting into something. So I guess chestnuts could be said to have a somewhat subtle flavor, and you don't want to be sort of standing on the neck of the chestnuts. This is the point whenever I'm cooking risotto where I'm tasting it so regularly that it's really hard to actually tell or sense any difference between one mouthful and the last mouthful. So I often will need to ask someone else to come and taste it because to me, and I'm hungry at this point, it all tastes done and I'm ready to eat. So I don't know why. I think it was vegan up to this point in time. Chestnuts, pumpkin, onion, garlic, bay leaf, white wine. Oh, the chicken stock obviously, so not vegan in that sense. And the Parmesan cheese will be adding in the end. And my secret ingredient that goes into lots of things, some Japanese dashi powder. Definitely, definitely recommend a little shot of that. You could put it into your stock as well and add it into it, but um, again, my girlfriend doesn't like when I put dashi powder into everything, but I do. And so if she wouldn't have seen it, she wouldn't have actually cared. But I like to think that I'm Jason Bourne in the kitchen, hiding in plain sight. Grana Padano, Grana Padano, not Parmigiano Reggiano. That's just my. I assume that that's sour grapes on my part. I assume that I have come to prefer the thing that is cheaper purely because I'm a tight ass. But I genuinely think that Grana Padano tastes better. The Grana Padano tastes better than Parmigiano Reggiano. It's just who doesn't love to eat, you know? And if you're the one cooking, you get to eat as much as you goddamn please. Maybe that's what you need to tell people that instead of like you're just merely tasting things, you get to eat. You're hungry, you're eating. It's great, and I guess more than that, if you don't go to a bowl of food or a plate of food famished, there's a good chance you won't stuff your face full of food. You're not the most attractive looking bowl of risotto in the entire world here, but it wasn't meant to be. But it is nice to eat food that looks nice. I wonder how one would garnish that to make it look even better. I don't know. I don't know. Let's find out next time.